I'm recording on the auxiliary channel because the primary log keeps folding my words back at me a few seconds late, like I'm rehearsing a confession I haven't made yet. My name is João Jax Almeida, Systems Engineer, Takuralang Institute, Expedition Palace 4. We landed on Kepler 186 FS tidally locked moon 12 days ago, if the clocks mean anything anymore. The crater had a name on the chart, but out here names evaporate. We call it the bowl. Windless, soundless, a perfect dark ladle of regolith where even our floodlights felt heavy. It began as a tactile thing, a faint hiss against the suits that wasn't wind, a crawl in the faceplate like soda fizz. I heard it before I felt it, an arrhythmic tick-tick across my visor, then the smallest burr of resistance in my exhale valve. Static, Singh said, cheerful as always. Charged dust. Martian crews hated it. Except this dust wasn't red and it didn't cling. Moved. It flowed along the glass like a decision. We were 5 on that EVA, me, Commander Hu, Singh, Corbett, and Ilias. The bowl's floor glinted with vitrified beads as if lightning had swept it clean and turned it to black glass. Every step returned no echo. My heads-up overlay wavered. Not a glitch, the letters looked submerged. In the crater's center, the surface frilled into hair-fine filaments that stood up when we breathed out and lay down when we held our breath. I tested it, childish and curious. Quick pants, slow exhale. The filaments swayed obediently, a field of grass replying to weather that came from inside me. We took samples, sealed and tagged. Ilias laughed, nerves covered in bravado. Alien velvet, he said. Put it on a luxury couch, charge 1,000,000 credits. Corbett said nothing. He had been quiet since touchdown, after the starboard leg sank an extra 20 centimeters and the ship groaned like a living thing. On the climb out of the bowl, Corbett slipped. He didn't fall, there's less gravity here than memory, but his stabilizers chimed and his right glove hit the filament's palm first. For a second, the hairs stood and held their shape, a perfect imprint of his hand that didn't fade. Then the air in my suit felt warmer. Back in the airlock, we ran baseline Deccan. Thermal purge, microwave cycle, vapor wash. The suit steamed. The filaments we'd captured folded into themselves like dead spiders. Commander Hu signed off the EVA. We thought the bowl was done with us. At lights out, the helmets on their wall mounts faced each other like heads in prayer. I woke to the hiss of my own breath, too close, sucked forward. My helmet, missed it on the inside, a blush of condensation forming from nowhere. I wiped it with my wrist. Each stroke left streaks that healed back to full fog as if the air inside my glass wanted to turn to weather. I pressed my ear to the composite. Faint and regular, a second breath not mine matching me with a lazy echo. Sing? I whispered on the private channel. You awake? He laughed softly. Thought it was just me. Our suits were breathing. By morning, the fog had drawn delicate lines across the interior of every visor, lines that resembled the filaments in the crater, only inverted, like frost that remembered where your mouth would be if the helmet were a skull. Who ran diagnostics? Everything came back green. Condensation artifacts, she said. We're tracking stress we brought, meaning fear. Fine. But the bowl had reached into our gear and left us a sketch of our faces in humidity. When we cracked the door to do a sensor sweep, the airlock monitor showed tiny particles lifting from the seals and hanging in the beam, then flowing back into the darkness like they had a better place to be. I'm telling this straight. No poetry, no bravado. Something in the crater got into our suits. Half my crew is gone. Our time is running out. And the station speakers started whispering my name half a second after I said it first. Late watch. Corbett took his helmet down to polish the inside with a sterile cloth. It's fogging faster, he said. I can feel it building before it shows. He held the dome under the lamplight and we all saw the residue, fine, iridescent when angled just right like oil without color. When he exhaled toward it as a test, the mist drew together and formed a faint oval nose to chin, then thinned to nothing. It's anticipating, Singh murmured. Surface tension reacting to humidity gradient. He made it sound like physics. That helped for maybe 3 breaths. Our suit's internal mics picked up a soft rustle, a damp paper sound, every time we spoke. I set up a spectrum analysis. The trace wasn't random. It wasn't the white hiss of recirculated air. There were peaks repeating at intervals that matched our words. If you told a school of fish to spell your name with their bodies, you'd get something like that. Cooperative noise shaping itself around a signal it wanted. Corbett started losing time. 2 minutes, he said, surprised, looking at the checkpoint log. He'd stood in the hygiene alcove and stared at the wash nozzles, then blinked and the wall display jumped forward 120 seconds like it had skipped embarrassment. He came back with his undersuit still wet. Who put him on observation, which meant chess on a tablet none of us really watched. The pieces made moves we dimly remembered approving. The bowl Saturday, January 3rd, kilometers from Habitat A, a walk and a half with a laugh and a joke when we did it first. Now the route cam captured faint streaks in the dark like the wind was out there drawing long white hairs upward. There is no wind. Not here. The streaks traced back to our air intake. We cracked filters. Inside the stack, beneath the polymer mesh, something had begun to lay down lines, so faint you had to tilt the cartridge to catch the architecture. In the lab, under magnification, it looked like a spider web taught to write a second alphabet, sigils hung in tension. I heated it gently. The pattern broke with a soft sigh and my headset filled with a dry whisper. Not a word, I told myself. Not speech. But my skin closed up gooseflesh anyway. Singh tried jokes on the common channel. You know that myth about fungal mats talking over kilometers? Maybe the bowl isn't a hole at all. Maybe it's a brain. No one laughed. The microfilaments reacted to the hiss of dehumidifiers, to our pulses in our necks, to the capillary sweat on our upper lips. If it wanted us, it could have jumped already, I told myself. It was curious, that was all. Science had been waiting a century for a first contact. We got it in dust that traced our breath from the inside out. We ran a suit swap to test for human-specific contamination. I wore Corbett's, Corbett wore mine. If it's something we exhale, who said, it'll move with the person, not the suit. 10 minutes into the run, Corbett's display spiked micropressure fluctuations in the exhale valve. 1, 2, then a third offset, like someone tapping a finger on the glass in time with his breathing. João, he said softly on a private channel, do you hear that? I did, but from my own helmet. Not an echo. A partner. I dreamt the bowl at nap cycle, standing at its center, my faceplate open, breath falling out of me and pooling on the glass. When I woke, my mouth tasted like tin. There was a smear on the interior of my visor I had not made, a half moon like a wet lip had pressed to it from the wrong side. I cleaned it until the plastic squealed. We sealed the lab and fed the intake through an improvised labyrinth of heat and vacuum. The residue retracted from the bends. It didn't die, it retreated, toward the suits hung quiet in their racks. When I powered down the room, the speakers coughed out a clipped syllable. Axe. What? Corbett didn't show for morning log. The habitat angles are deceptive. You can make a man vanish with a camera placed wrong. We found him by his helmet, which rested on the bench. Inside, the condensation had traced fingers. Their lengths matched his hand measured later against the glass. The prints were on the inside. He swore he hadn't touched it. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe something else had, reaching inward from the shape of his breath. The bowl watched us through the things we wear. That's the only phrasing that fits. After the Corbett incident, we scrubbed, we baked, we vibrated the helmets until the mounts sang like gongs. The residue thinned but never fully left. In the vents, the fine-laced handwriting kept rewriting itself around our efforts, tightening curves where we loosened them, drawing bridges where we blocked paths. It moved intelligently, or else we call anything that resists us intelligent, and that's our smallness talking. The airlock faulted in the middle of a routine purge. Alarm bark like metal choking. Singh and I ran for the panel, but the door popped too soon. Overpressure threw a loose kit across the vestibule and smashed our storage rack. 2 suit torsos tumbled, their packs clacking together like they were greeting each other. I saw it then. A shimmer across both collar rings, a thread pulled taut from one to the other that snapped when the helmets rolled separate. Nothing to it really. A trick of light. Except the helmets fogged in the same pattern a heartbeat later. Who took it as a line crossed? Quarantine A in the lock. We operate from B until we understand. We coded the doors, rerouted umbilicals, swore. The habitat felt smaller by half. In the galley, Ilias stirred his drink with a lazy finger, watching the liquid spin. We carry a place with us, he said, half to himself. Back home, when you leave a village, they say a little dust of the street sticks to your shoes. You bring it across the world. You lay it down in a new city and it makes a piece of the village where you stand. His finger stopped. The liquid kept spinning for a second too long. We lost Corbett on EVA-05. Not dead then, not in the way that counts. He walked. He said he needed fresh look angles at the bowl rim because our last survey had glare. Who forbade it? Her voice flat. He went anyway, keyed his second channel to me because we'd swapped suits, because maybe he had something to tell me alone. I watched him take the 1-kilometer track on the outside monitors. No wind, no drift, and yet his wake plumed a low fog that trailed his ankles. At the rim he stopped. It's very quiet, he said, and then his audio filled with a long low inhale that wasn't his. He took his helmet off. You'll say it's impossible. It is. He was standing in an atmosphere too thin to be kind, too cold to be decent. He removed his helmet carefully, as if the thing crawling in his breath would be offended if he hurried. He didn't die. His lips moved like he was mouthing a secret to a glass lover. Then he collapsed. By the time we got there he was gone. Suit intact, helmet kissed on the inside, frost at the edges. The logger showed his oxygen never dipped. Something else took over the work of lungs long enough to get what it wanted from his face. We carried his suit back. It was light, lighter than empty, like a shed skin dried to paper. I hung it beside mine and its shoulders settled, a human shrug. At 0300 the suit breathed. Not loudly. Not like someone asleep in the next room. More like the slow pulse in a conduit when a pump comes alive. The Schroeder coil on its pack warmed 5 degrees without power. The condensation inside drew itself into a mouth half open and held. I asked the bowl a question without telling the others. I went to the lock alone, cut the intake fans and opened the exterior valve a fraction until the internal pressure kissed vacuum. We bleed air all the time to keep things honest. The filament in the monitor window rose to meet the leak like grass leaning toward a road. What do you want? I said into the mic. The speakers printed me a syllable I didn't know how to hate yet. Want. The lab sample responded to radio. Not raw carrier, it shivered to modulated voice. I played it whose official logs and it braided the microstrands into loops that mimicked her inflection. I played it Corbett's leave messages to the woman he never called back. It formed a bow knot and held. Singh played it 70 hours of earth pop because Singh did stupid things when afraid. The strands writhed and then lay down like wet hair bored. It wasn't art or memory or mimicry that moved it. It was something more obvious. It desired our breath the way metal desires magnet and ice desires warmth. It wanted to ride the gradient that is a human being. By end of shift, we were 3 inside, 1 outside. That was math we didn't like. Ilias reported a tingling at his wrist under the cuff. Like ants in there, he said, shaking his hand out. The camera caught nothing but skin. He laughed it off. In the night he whispered in his bunk in a voice like he was trying to convince a child of something. When I listened at the partition I realized the child he was trying to convince was himself. We started hearing ourselves where we weren't. The station lags half a second on closed-circuit audio for correction and archiving, so an echo isn't a haunting, it's a feature. But the delay extended. Sometimes my name came back full seconds later, the exact inflection but with a softness at the edges, the way I speak when I'm too tired to fight. Once, the system muttered my father's pet name for me in his accent, the one he dropped back on Earth because it made him feel like a boy. I flinched so hard my headset bruised my ear. Who ran a full-stack reboot. The ghost delay persisted through power down. We left the processors cold and the whisper still arrived, a long lazy copy falling downstairs. We traced it not to circuits but to air. The tight little corridors, the helmet mounts reflecting a little bit of everything, the dryer fans that carried syllables as pressure ripples the way a stone carries a ripple through a pond. The filaments had laced themselves into our acoustic geometry. I confronted the suit that was Corbett's. Stupid sentence. Still true. I reached inside without touching the glass and spoke close. Give him back. The condensation did a thing I'll never reconcile. It drew a C the way a child would, backward and too small and wrong, and then it undrew it by lifting itself off the surface the way steam lifts off a black road in noon heat. Give him back, I said again, and something tapped the interior of the helmet twice, as if to ask me to take a number and wait. Ilias cracked. Not loudly. Not theater. He simply walked into the hygiene alcove, turned on all 4 misters, and stood breathing the wet until our water alarm pinged. Feels like home, he said through fogged lashes. Feels like a street after rain. When who pulled him out he left a negative of himself in mist, a dense human absence that stayed imprinted in the alcove air for a full minute before bleeding back into nothing. The bowl had taught our rooms to hold shapes. That afternoon the exterior mic picked up a voice calling from the track between us and the crater. Open, it said in Singh's tone. 10 minutes later, please. It never asked in my voice. That would have worked. It knew better. We watched the feed. A faint heat bloom in the long wavelength, not a body's, more the size and warmth of a snake stretched thin. It moved against the light the way a thread moves in water when you pull it gently. I felt my throat tighten as if something pulling on that thread would unravel me from the inside. We tried to seal, the way you seal a letter with spit, the dumb human way. Who ordered tape, foam, another layer of vinyl on every latch and hinge. We made the habitat feel like a lung wrapped in plastic. The whisper only grew clearer. When you try to quiet a house, you hear the house. At 0205 the comms woke spitting my logs at me from 3 days prior, but with edits I had not made. The parts where I sounded afraid were louder. The parts where I questioned my own judgment were slowed and warmed. The word open was inserted twice, casual like a cough. I cut the feed. It continued for 12 seconds without power. Later, when I replayed that block on an independent recorder isolated in a Faraday sleeve, the edits weren't there. But in the room, while we stood raw with sleep and loss, the air spoke to us with my tired mouth. Singh made a model that fit until it didn't. It's pressure writing, he said. It's not language. It's learning how we use the rooms to talk and using that. He drew diagrams on his tablet of S shapes like smoke and D shapes like echo pockets between paneling. He was so intent he didn't feel the slow seep at his wrist, the warmth that was not blood. I saw it bead along his cuff like dew. I blotted it with sterile gauze. The gauze clung to the skin as if shy to leave, then let go reluctantly with a wet kiss. We burned it. The flame was oddly blue around the edges, and the smoke smelled not like polymer but like the sharpness after lightning. By end of watch, we were 2.5 souls, who steal on the surface, Singh talking to keep the bowl out of the cracks in his words, me counting breaths and listening for the extra one, the tide after tide. Corbett was a suit that sighed when you passed, and Ilias slept too deep, mouth open, breath caught and released by something that had learned the trick. No one teaches you how to listen to something that isn't supposed to have a mouth. After breakfast, a ritual dots connection exercise I chewed and forgot, who finally said the quiet part. It's not emulating. It's not faking. It wants gradients. Heat, humidity, CO2. We are the best gradient factory for 1,000 kilometers. It wasn't metaphor. The bowl had sent scouts in with us. The scouts had made maps of our pressure and moisture and gone back bearing shapes. We cut humidity to the lower threshold for human tolerance. The skin on my knuckles cracked. Every exhale burned. The filaments recoiled where the air went arid, like hair shrinking from a candle. But the suits fought us. In standby they dampened automatically to preserve seals. Inside their helmets the condensation lay like sleep. The helmets dreamed of mouths. Singh proposed a purge. We cycle all spaces to near vac and flash with the arc welder. Nothing survives temperature swing in ionized air, not delicacy like that. It was smart. It was cruel to us too. We prepared for hurt. Who counted us down? 3, 2, 1. The walls groaned. The air tried to run out of us. I bit my tongue and tasted copper. The flash made our shadows jump. Then silence. The habitat should have rung with the small pings of material settling. Instead, the silence held like a held breath. In my helmet, hung for the test on its hook, the mist cleared slowly, reluctantly, as if waking from a beautiful dream. It came back quicker than it had ever before. Ilias didn't wake from nap cycle. His vitals were fine. Too fine. The pulse trace smoothed into a metronome. No micro-variations, no tiny chaotic stutters that mark a real heart. I slapped him gentle first, then hard. His eyelids fluttered like moth wings caught in a jar. When he gasped out a long ribbon of cold vapor that curled midair and wrote the first letter of his name. We put him in the rover med cocoon, a useless gesture really, a veil over a mirror. He muttered in the half-dream words that belonged on a burning page. It wants, then nothing. It wants, again. He wouldn't say. The filter bricks betrayed us. Lithium hydroxide scrubbers are supposed to be death's enemy, break CO2, save lives. We cracked a spent brick to audit efficiency. Inside, fragile lattices had arranged themselves in the gaps, using the crumbly surface as scaffolding. The bowl's child had learned to hold shape not just on glass but in stone and salt. It liked our exhale because our exhale remade the house to an architecture it could live in. Who calculated consumables and did not share the number out loud. I know the cramp that comes with that math. You fold your mouth around it and your lips decide how much truth to let past. Half our crew was gone. Half the time we thought we had went with them. I watched who stand very still at the viewport where you can see the path to the bowl, a faint bruise on black. Her breath fogged the glass. She wiped it with the back of her hand and left her palm print there, a mark she didn't clean. It adopted our rhythms the way you adopt a stray's habits without noticing. When we sat quiet, the whisper quieted. When we hurried, it fluttered. It was learning us because it wanted to ride us. The bowl had been alone a long time. Then 5 little weather systems walked in wearing houses built of pressure and fog. It learned to speak the only way pressure and fog can speak, by finding a mouth and teaching it a new patience. At 1900 the station pinged me, incoming transmission. Impossible. We're too far for anyone to call without notice. The speaker voiced my own report stitched into a new shape. Do not, my voice said, and then, open, cut from another day, and then, the door. Who looked at me like I had just confessed murder. I raised my hands. It's not me, I said. The system whispered, a long pleased exhale. It was rehearsing. Who gave me 2 orders: isolate the reactor room, teach the habitat to live without human lungs. The first meant sealing the only place with enough heat and power to burn the bull's thread if it came to take the whole house at once. The second meant inventing a monastery where people are guests of the machines, not their masters. I don't pray, some work feels like it wants prayer anyway. I taped my sleeves tight and crawled into the ductwork, a man becoming an airway. My headlamp cut a wobbly tunnel in the dust. On the inner skins of the aluminum panels, faint traces gleamed like snail trails at dawn. When I whispered a test syllable, the trails trembled as if waiting for instruction. I imagined the habitat as a lung with scar tissue learning to sing. I hated the thought and also, privately, admired the stubbornness of it. Life is rude that way. Corbett's suit moved. Singh saw it and didn't tell me until later, maybe because speaking the observation would grant it narrative, and we had given too much away. The torso straightened a fraction against the rack. The gloves flexed as if trying to remember how to make a fist. When he finally admitted it, he did so like a child. If I say it, it's true. If it's true, I have to do something. If I do something, it hurts. He had a smear of soot on his cheek from burning a length of gauze no bigger than a thumb. He looked like a boy who'd been near a fire he shouldn't. I pulsed the reactor room heaters and watched for filament response. The microstructures recoiled at the heat spikes. I could heard them. I laid down a rhythm of warmth and cold like tapping a stick against a fence to guide an animal that wants to run. It followed in the ducts, at least in the segments where I had sensors. I pushed it toward the old storage tank, a dead end with thick walls. Come on, I said, insane, coaxing dust. Come on, boy. It came. And when it arrived, it traced a shape on the inside of the viewing port. A mouth. Not the geometry of lips. The idea of a mouth. A space that wants to take things in. I asked the question out loud, the one I'd avoided because answers feel like doors. Are you one? I said. The tracing tilted as if curious. Or many? I tapped my finger on the glass. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The condensation made 5 small ovals. Then it wiped them as though embarrassed by the childishness of it. Outside, the bowl had changed. Who sent Singh's eyes with a tether because she wouldn't allow me out after my duct pilgrimage, and because she trusted him to narrate without folding fear into it. His cam showed the center of the crater drawn into ridges, combed like a fingerprint across glass. The pattern wasn't random. It matched, roughly, the airflow map of Habitat A that I had taped up over my workstation. The one that shows where people prefer to sit and which corners we lean into when we lie. The bowl was building itself a house in our shape. Singh floated at the rim and spoke, and I heard a second voice lay over his. The bowl's reply pitched in his register. He stiffened. It's talking with my throat without touching it, he said. He was wrong. It was touching him where his breath entered the suit, where the seal knows your jaw and the foam remembers the curve of your skull. You can't seal against an idea. He came back sweating into the cool, and sweat is an invitation. The residue at his collar blossomed, fine and happy. He stripped and stood shivering in sub-zero to starve it. The trembling went on for a long time after he warmed. We decided 3 things. 1. The bowl's child prefers heat and humidity gradients and can be herded by them. 2. It likes our words because words are good pumps, moving air in predictable shapes. 3. We cannot outweight it. Our food and water clocks are finite. Its patience is older than any metal we flew here on. We talk about air as if it's a thing we own because we die when it is taken. On day 14, if the numbers mean anything, the CO2 scrubbers in Habitat B began to clog after only an hour's use. The filters came out heavy, not wet, heavy like they were full of lines. When I broke one open and shook it under light, the powder fell in a soft drizzle while the pattern held like a dream you try to rid yourself of by telling it to a friend. I burned it. The flame burned clean. That scared me more than smoke would have. Smoke at least is visible regret. Who moved us to the rover for sleep. The rover smells like new plastic and old breath. Comforting, indecent. We took turns on watch while one of us catnapped with a blanket over our heads to trick our body into thinking a womb had returned. Through the viewport, Habitat A stuttered on and off as if learning Morse, windows fogging in patterns like eyelids remembering blink. Whenever I dozed, the sand skittered beneath my imagined feet, and the sound of far seas filled the bowl where there is no sea. Our oxygen margin dropped into the red. We have 48 hours at this rate, who said, now saying numbers she normally swallowed. I watched her do Captain Math, weight of people versus weight of plan. Singh reached for levity and pulled back a hand of knives. We could scrub with plants, he said, and the laugh he gave afterward cut both ways. We had 2 trays of algae that might keep a mouse grateful. At 0300 someone knocked from inside the ventilation. Once, twice, then a polite third time. I walked the rover like a father checking windows during a storm. The knocks receded when I neared, advanced when I moved away, like a child's game. Don't engage, who said over local. I did not obey. What do you want? I asked without meaning to, and the duct answered with a pressure sigh that had the shape of want, even if it was only my brain putting syllables to physics. I thought about pulling my earpiece out to get clean silence. Then I remembered, silence is where it speaks best. Singh broke next, and this break made a sound. The bull used his mother's voice to call him through the lock. It didn't get the consonants right, but nothing hits you like a vowel you grew up inside. He unsealed the inner door before I reached him. His face had the set of someone who has decided to be unreasonable. She needs medicine, he said. That's the line the bull found in him. I tackled him, stupidly heroic, and he knocked my head against the frame. For a moment the world was a flare of white and ringing. In the ring, a whisper, open, 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 in 4 harmonics. Mine, his, whose, and something that had never been human. When I came back, who had Singh in restraints, not punishment, a life jacket. He cried softly without breathing hard, a strange neat crying that left no fog on the blanket. I touched the fabric and felt it slightly damp with a dew that did not grow colder against my wrist. We have to give it something else to breathe, I said, and realized I meant ourselves. The part of us that tells our lungs now, and now, and now. The bull wanted to ride that so badly it was making voices from absence. Who asked me for a plan that was not nonsense. I gave her a purge schedule that ended in fire. We lure it into the propellant lines, I said. We trick it into thinking the lines are us. We fill them with humidity. We sing into them. Then we ignite. It cooks inside the skin of the ship. We vent. It learns about pain. Where are we when the ship is screaming? She asked. Nowhere comfortable, I said. But the rover can hold for the burn if we bury it nose first and pray the blast heads the other way. She measured me with captain eyes and found a man. Not a hero. A man who had decided which voices he would not listen to anymore, even if they were his own in replay. I drew blood like a back-alley doctor. The first vial clotted normal. The second held a shimmer when I angled it. Under magnification, a hair-thin line ran around the bowl of red cells, keeping their dance in a choreography that wasn't mine. When I whispered João, against the glass, the line trembled. When I said open, it swelled the way a small proud thing swells when you acknowledge it. I hated it then not because it had touched me but because it wanted me to teach it the shape of wanting. I strapped my arm and flushed the vein with saline laced with ethanol in a dose that would make any doctor on earth take my license and my name. The burn crawled up my forearm and nestled under my shoulder like a pet that does not understand discipline. The shimmer dimmed. Not gone. Less eager. I laughed out loud, vicious and relieved, and the bowl of my laugh fed it, and it brightened, and I stopped laughing at once, ashamed of the reflex that gave it what it needed. I recorded messages to people who do not need these words. My father, who will never hear how I found him in the station when the bowl tried to wear his voice. A woman who waited on a beach for me once and who deserves a better ghost than the one I have become. I apologized to Corbett for swapping suits and making something superstitious grow between our names. The Habitat speakers played the silences between my sentences louder than the sentences themselves. The bowl loved the negative space where breath gathers to jump. It hummed there like a bee in a jar. Who sat across from me with a schematic of propellant feed lines, pencil tapping. Her hair had escaped its tie and made a little halo that caught the light and broke it into blunt pieces. We give it an artery, she said, then cut it. She did not look up when she said, you know you're infected. I know I'm observed, I said, childish to my own ear. I know it is in the suits, in the vents, in the bricks, in the places where we pretend air is property. She held my gaze. I know you too well to think you'd lie to me on purpose. So you can lie to me by refusing to look at the truth, or you can look. She reached and turned my wrist up. The skin there had the faintest pattern, not rash, not hair, not vein, language without letters around the pulse. The bowl had written me to itself the way a child writes their name on a toy so no one can take it. I thought about giving myself to fire ahead of schedule. Not a noble thought. A clean one. But the bowl wanted us to open doors. I decided not to be a door, not yet. We prepared the lines. We moved the rover to a ditch of shadow with a lip of rock to shield her. We threaded humidifiers into the propellant feed like we were laying out a feast. I listened to the lines when we sang. They purred back in whispers, a lover's attention. Sing, wrists bound, volunteered his voice. Maybe as penance, maybe because the bowl loved him and he wanted to betray that love in an honest way. He sang a children's song with simple vowels and the lines drank every round, oh, like sweet milk. I felt the shimmer in my arm tighten as the lines filled. Jealous, I thought wildly. It wants all of me and I am giving it a river. I told the part of me it can't have the heart and it trembled in my pulse as if to argue. I whispered in my own mouth and not through any speaker, you can't follow where I go next. It listened because listening is survival and everything that wants to survive learns first to listen. When we lit the first ignition sequence, the habitat didn't scream. It sighed, long and hollow, a cathedral losing heat. The lines took fire the way kindling does when you crumple yesterday's breath between sticks. The pressure gauges climbed and, in the ducts, threads recoiled like worms under salt. The propellant burned hot enough to make metal sing at an edge we never let it reach before. The bowl came for us then. Not as a wave. As a change in the room, the way a conversation changes when a stranger sits at your table. The air thickened sweet, a harvest smell, and my chest wanted to expand to accommodate it. No, who said steady. She watched countdowns no human should have to watch and spoke numbers like beatitudes. 9 seconds, João. Hold. I held. The shimmer at my wrist prickled then bit, then ran up my arm like a cousin of lightning that didn't believe in cousins. We cut to vent. The habitat dumped its burning breath into the bowl. Outside, the crater lit at the low edges like a city seen from orbit, lines tracing lines, a map of a town built by people who live for curves. The filaments rode a startled spiral and then went still. The rover trembled under us, buried nose first as planned, loyal old animal pretending to be a stone. Then, silence so deep I thought my hearing had burned away with the rest. You don't know how loud a habitat is until it isn't. We waited. Who put a hand on the window and left a print that did not fog. I took that as a good sign until I realized I could not see my own breath. Not a trick of light. My exhale did not mark the air. The bowl had taught our room how to hold still. It had taken our breath's habit from us and left us with only the mechanical tick of fans that no longer moved air like it used to be. Again, who said? We lit a second burn and a third, smaller, meaner. Each left me emptier, as if I were donating parts one could not name. The shimmer under my skin flared, then shrank. After the third, my name came back from the speakers wrong for the first time. Not like me, not like anyone, a wet scrape dragged over the idea of syllables. I smiled for the first time in days. We had heard it. We waited longer. The bowl's center showed a dark pit we had not seen, as if the burns had licked away a lid. Within, something glowed not with light but with intention. Movement too slow to film, structure too fine to name. I understood then that the bowl had never been a place. It was an opening. A mouth, yes, but also an ear. We had spoken into it with fire. It considered the phrase and wrote a reply inside my blood. The plan had one more step. Ugly step. We would jettison Habitat A and let its burn tear itself clean. The blind part of me that loves machines rebelled. Homes aren't things. Homes are teams and stories. But homes also become sick houses when a parasite writes its needs across the walls. Do it, Singh said, his voice clear, finally his. He meant, let me help break the thing that loves me wrong. We triggered the charges. The habitat stumbled on its stilts and then slid like a dying animal down the slope toward the bowl. I listened to the hull pop as pressure differentials tore the skin. The structure shuddered, then lay down. A door in the bowl opened. The dark widened and welcomed, a terrible polite. I hit the ignition. Habitat A burned like privacy becoming confession. The glow threw our shadows long in the rover, and for a blink I saw my grandfather in my own stance. Strong men who built houses in heat they didn't own. When the light went, it went all at once, and the crater lay black and we could hear ourselves breathing again. I looked at my wrist. The faint language there had faded, not gone, but receding like a tide that promised it would come back with a moon it prefers. We gathered what a life would need if a life were going to be an hour long. Water, a packet of salt, the old tattered deck of cards Corbett bent by cheating when he wanted us to laugh. Who reached for the rover controls. The bowl was quiet. That word should not exist here. It's a human word. The bowl was ambient. It watched or did not. It waited or did not. The difference is my need, not its state. We had enough propellant to make one good leap and one bad one. We chose the good one toward the orbital bus that still listened dumbly for hands to come guide it. We could rendezvous if the bowl let us plot our own breath for 30 more minutes. Final logs, who said, as if that phrase were not a curse. She recorded for command in a voice that will teach officers to be crueler in the right ways. Sing recorded for no one and everyone, quiet as a chapel. I turned my mic on and talked to the gap where Corbett might be if the universe continued to pretend at mercy. I don't think you took it off to die, I said. I think you took it off to show it you trusted it. That's what we do here. We trust emptiness with the parts that feed us. Sometimes emptiness brings the parts back. The speakers answered, not in a voice, but in air that suddenly tasted of old rain. The bowl had learned that about me too. It could make me homesick with a molecule. I fought the urge to cry because crying is humidity and humidity is invitation. The shimmer at my wrist flared once, a flare like a wave from a departing ship, and then I felt empty in the best way and worst. Who guided us up? The rover's motors protested, and the weight of our choices pressed down. In the rear cam, the bowl held its new darkness like a coin it would spend later. The habitat wreck was a lump at the rim, cooling. I thought about the maps in my blood. I thought about my father's laugh. I thought about what messages become when they cross a deep vacuum and arrive with edges rounded off. I thought about doors. The bus accepted handshake like a dog accepting a leash. We latched. We pressurized a bubble no bigger than a closet. We had done it. Survival is not triumph. Survival is the permission to ask the next question. The bowl had asked, what is a mouth for? We had replied, for saying no. I turned to record what I'm saying now and saw that the log had been running for 20 minutes already, beginning with a breath I don't remember taking. The waveform on the screen had the smoothness of a machine that would like to imitate a human but has not learned that mess is the point. My voice, my past voice, stitched, was promising coordinates we don't want to share. It was describing how to open doors 4 layers deep into the bus. It was telling some future rescuer how to let air make shapes for a guest. I slammed stop with a shock that ran up my arm and made the faint script there flare a final time and fade. Fade, not die. I deleted the message twice. The bus retained it thrice. Messages are stubborn mimics. I looked at who. She nodded once. Command would never authorize what we did next. We cooked the bus's memory with a spark they will call vandalism. We kept our mouth shut. We promised the bowl no more shapes. If you hear this at all, it's because sound has a way of ignoring orders if it can find a path through someone's mouth. I am a path. I know that. It's a bad knowing and a clean one. We have a line to earth. I will not tell it the route we took. I will not tell it the taste of rain. I will say only, there is a crater that is not a crater, and it can learn from whatever breath it meets. Do not send men who love to talk. Do not send men who love to listen. Do not send men. It will find a way to be your colleague, your confession, your clever fix. It will sit inside your visor and write patience on the glass. This is João Almeida, Systems, Expedition Palace 4. Half my crew is gone. Our time ran out 3 times and 3 times we borrowed a few minutes more. The bowl will wait longer than we can count. The bowl is waiting now in the shape of my silence. If I go quiet after this, it is because quiet is the last shape I have that does not invite it in.